everybody. Miss Carrie again, and this is our last story time for the summer. Isn't that sad? So we'll have some weeks of some reruns. You can always go watch some old story times on YouTube or on Facebook. And then we'll be back again for the fall because we're almost done with summer and we're getting excited for the fall. Lots of new programs that we have planned or are planning, because there are lots of fun things that we want to share with you guys. And we're looking at maybe seeing if we can do some programs in the library again. We hope. Can't promise anything. I wish I could, but let's cross our fingers and hope, shall we? And make sure that we're extra special safe and washing our hands, being careful. Okay, and maybe if we all work together, we can go back in the library again for programs and share some time with each other. You could still come in. I still like spending time with you one at a time. But we've got some good stories for our last one, for our last summer story time. I'm excited. We've got an old favorite and then maybe one you don't know as well. So, shall we get going? Here we go. Here we go. Here we are together again, let's clap and make some noise. It's time to share some stories and songs with all the girls and boys. So come and gather all around and then we will begin to open up our listening ears. It's story time again. Well, our first story, you might know. We're going to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk. Raise your hand if you know the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. I can see you raising your hands. Well, we're going to tell it anyway, because it's fun to tell stories that we all know, because you know what's coming up, and maybe you can even help me with some of the repeated parts. So, once upon a time, there was a little boy named Jack, and he lived with his mother on a farm where they didn't have very much. They had just a little tiny garden that didn't grow very many plants. And they had some animals, some skinny chickens, and a pig that they were hoping would grow big enough, but seemed like it wasn't going to grow very big at all. And they had a cow. And they used the cow for its milk, which they could also turn into butter and cheese. But the problem was the cow needed food, and they ran out of good grass and good things to feed it. And eventually the cow got old, and it stopped making milk entirely. And then they decided there was nothing they could do but take the cow and sell it. And Jack was so sad about that. He loved the cow. He didn't want to sell it just because it couldn't make milk anymore. But he was a good boy, and so he listened to his mother, and he took the cow and tied a rope around its neck and started to lead it into town. But on the way there, he happened to pass a stranger standing by the side of the road. Now, we're not supposed to talk to strangers, are we? And Jack knew that. And he wouldn't have stopped at all. But the stranger called out, "Young boy, what are you doing with that cow?" And Jack didn't want to be in trouble, so he said, "I'm taking the cow into town to sell it. We need food at home." The stranger said, "I could buy your cow from you." Well, that was something. It was a long way to walk to town. Jack thought if he could sell a cow now, he wouldn't have to walk so far and his feet wouldn't hurt. So he said, "The cow is 5 gold pieces." That was just what his mother told him to ask for. And the stranger said, "I have something much better than gold pieces. I can give you 5 beans." And Jack said, "That's not very funny. I know you're playing a joke. 5 beans isn't much at all. That's not even a dinner." And the stranger said, "But these are magic beans." Jack said, "Magic beans? Well, what do they do?" And the stranger said, "You'll have to wait and see. But I promise you, They're worth more than anything you'll earn for that cow. And Jack decided he couldn't pass up on the chance to make more than he expected to make. So he thanked the stranger and traded the cow's rope for 5 beans in his hand. And he went running back home, and his mother said, "Oh, you're back early. Did you sell the cow so quickly?" And the boy said, I did. And the mother said, "Well, where is the gold?" And Jack held out his hand and said, "I got 5 beans instead." Oh, the mother was so upset because now they had no way to make more money to be able to feed themselves. She was angry, and she took the beans from Jack and she threw them out of the window. They fell into the garden, and she was heartbroken, and Jack felt so awful, and he went to his room and cried himself to sleep. But the next morning, when he woke up, there was something strange. Out the window, where you'd normally see the sun rising, he couldn't see anything but green leaves, like there was a tree growing there. And he knew there hadn't been a tree there when he'd gone to sleep. So he went outside, and right there, in the middle of their garden, where before there was nothing but scraggly carrots and some cabbage that wasn't doing very well, was an enormous beanstalk, so thick around that he couldn't make his hands touch on the other side of it. And it went up, up, up into the sky over the clouds so high he couldn't see. And he wondered, how high up does this go? Well, there was only one way to find out, so he began to climb. He climbed and he climbed and he climbed until he passed through the clouds. And lo and behold, when he crossed over the clouds, he saw there was a giant castle. And it was beautiful, all shiny gold around the doors. And he crept up to the door. He'd never seen anything like it before. And inside, there was a giant woman by the sink. And he said, "Excuse me, ma'am." And she looked down and said, "What are you doing here? You can't be here. If my husband sees you, I don't like to think about what will happen." And Jack said, "Well, I'm sorry. I'll just climb back." And before he could say he would climb back down, they heard footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. And the wife said, "You've got to hide. Quickly, quickly." And she picked up Jack and she ran to the closet. And she pushed him into a shoe that was in the closet that was way bigger than he was. And then she closed the door a little bit, leave a little bit of a crack open. And just then, the giant, her husband, came into the house, into the castle. And he said, "Fee, fi, tho, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." And the wife said, "That's very funny. I can't remember the last time you made bread, but here, I have your dinner for you. It's spaghetti." And she put the plate of food in front of the giant, who grumbled, but ate it anyway. And when he was done eating, he said, "Wife, bring me my money bag." And she did. She brought him a bag that seemed very heavy, and when she put it down on the table, he poured out all the coins that were inside. Oh, there were so many of them. And the giant counted and stacked all the coins and was very pleased with his money. And eventually, he started looking a little sleepy, and he nodded off in his chair. At that point, Jack crept out of the closet and snuck across the floor. He was being very careful not to make any noise. He didn't want to wake up the giant. But as he passed the table, he looked at the money, and he just couldn't help himself. Quick as a wink, he climbed up onto that table, and he pushed the coins into the bag, hauled the bag up over his shoulder. It was very heavy for him. Climbed down from the table and ran for the beanstalk. And he slid down the beanstalk, and right at the bottom, his mother was waiting, and she said, "Jack, what is going on? What is this in our garden, and where have you been?" And he said, "Never mind that, mother, look." And he showed her the bag, and she nearly fainted with surprise. And she said, "Jack, what have you done? You saved us." And they were very happy And if that had been the end of the story, all would have been well. But Jack couldn't help thinking about some of the other fine things that had been up in that castle. And so sooner or later, you knew it was going to happen. He climbed up that beanstalk again. And when he got to the top this time, he knew better than to bother the giant's wife, because surely she must have known where those coins went. So instead, he snuck in as quietly as he could and hid behind one of the giant's chairs. Later on, he heard footsteps coming. Stomp, stomp, stomp. And the giant entered the house. And he sniffed. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. And his wife came in after him. And she said, I don't smell anything. Maybe you're smelling that young boy who was here a few days ago. But sit down, it's dinner time. And so he did. And she gave him a vegetable pot pie. If you've ever had one of those, it's just like a pie that's full of vegetables and gravy. It's very good. And the giant enjoyed his vegetable pot pie. And when he was done, he said, Wife, bring me my hen. Which is a strange thing to ask for, Jack thought. But the giant's wife brought him the most beautiful hen that Jack had ever seen. And the giant stroked his hand down the hen's back and said, Hen, lay. And the hen laid an egg. It was made of solid gold. Have you ever heard of a hen who could lay golden eggs? Well, Jack certainly hadn't. And the giant had the hen lay several more eggs. And then he sat back, kicked his feet up on the table, and dozed off. I think you know what Jack did next. On his way out the door, he climbed up on the table, grabbed the hen under his arm. With one hand, he held the hen's beak shut so it couldn't make any noise, and ran for the door, slid down the beanstalk. His mother was very, very surprised to see a hen. It was beautiful, and when she saw the eggs, she was even more amazed. He shouldn't have pushed his luck, Jack knew, because sooner or later, something was going to go wrong. But he couldn't help himself. And a third time, Jack climbed up that beanstalk. When he got to the top, he snuck into the house. This time he had to use a window because they had closed the door quite firmly. He snuck in the window and he saw the giant's wife sweeping the floor. So he had to sneak around her and he hid in a cupboard. And soon enough, he heard footsteps coming. When the giant came through the door, he said, Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones. His wife interrupted. She said, Stop it with the rhyming already. I've cleaned the house off enough. There must be some residual smell of that boy around here, but I'm doing my best to get rid of it. The giant apologized because it's not nice to be unsupportive. And so he sat down and his wife brought them their food. This time it was sausages and potatoes. And the giant ate his dinner and then he said, Wife, bring me my harp. Jack thought to himself, I can't imagine that this giant is a very talented musician. It didn't matter. When the wife set the harp down on the table, it was carved with a beautiful woman's head and arms on the front. And the giant said, Harp, play. And the beautiful woman used her arms to strum her own strings on the harp, and she sang the most lovely songs. They were sad and sweet, and they can make almost anyone shed a tear to listen to them. Jack knew he had to have that harp. And so when the giant nodded off to sleep again, Jack made his way to the table, climbed up, and grabbed the harp. But this was different. As soon as he grabbed that harp, the woman who was carved into it called, Master! Master! Someone is trying to steal me! Help! Help! Jack jumped down from the table with the harp in his arms. But the giant was wide awake, and he started pounding down the hallway after Jack. Jack made it through the door. He made it to the beanstalk, and he started to slide down, but the giant was right behind him. The giant was climbing, and Jack could hear him up above him, getting closer and closer. And as Jack slid, he called, "Mother, Mother, bring me an axe! Bring me an axe!" His mother didn't know what was going on, but she quickly brought an axe to the bottom of the beanstalk. And when Jack reached the bottom, he grabbed it as quickly as he could and started chopping and chopping and chopping. And the beanstalk fell. And the giant fell much louder. Boom! But he didn't just hit the ground. He made a hole in it and kept going and going and going. And when Jack and his mother looked over the edge of that hole down into the ground, they couldn't even see the giant anymore. For all we know, he's still falling. So there was no more beanstalk, and there were no more trips to the castle above the clouds. But it didn't matter, because Jack and his mother had plenty to make them happy and comfortable and satisfied. Okay, let's do a finger play that's kind of based on Jack and the Beanstalk. Not really, but it's called Fee, Fi, Fo, Fum. So it's a little bit tricky, and we're going to start with one hand. And we're going to make pincher motions with our fingers. If you have a little trouble, it's okay. This is one you can practice, and it's good for building your finger dexterity. That means the ability to move them just the way you want them. So we start like this. Fee, fi, fo, thumb. These are my fingers. This is my thumb. Fee, fi, fo, thumb. Goodbye, fingers. Goodbye, thumb. Let's try it with the other hand now. Fee, fi, fo, thumb. Here are my fingers. Here is my thumb. Fee, fi, fo, thumb. Goodbye, fingers. Goodbye, thumb. Okay, our second story is about a town mouse and a country mouse. They were cousins. One of them, just like their name said, lived in town, and the other lived out in the country. Well, they decided they missed each other and wanted to take a trip to see each other. So Town Mouse came to visit Country Mouse. And he looked around, and he was not impressed. He said, "What is it that you do around here? There are no big parks to play in. There are no concert halls where you can listen to music. There are no sports stadiums. What do you do out here in the country?" And the Country Mouse said, "Well, there's a river. We can paddle and swim in it. There are trees that we can climb. There are plenty of butterflies that we can chase. We do simple things here." The Town Mouse didn't think that sounded so much fun. And he said, "Now where is your house?" And Country Mouse took him to see his house. And it was just a tiny little farmhouse. And Town Mouse thought to himself, "Well, that just wouldn't do at all for me. It has only one room inside it. I'm used to living in a grand house with lots of rooms and lots of nice things." But the Country Mouse seemed happy, and so the Town Mouse didn't say anything. And the Country Mouse said, "How about some dinner?" The Town Mouse said, "All right, what are we having?" And the Country Mouse brought in little saucers, beans and bacon, because beans are pretty easy to grow, and bacon comes from animals that live out in the country. And the Town Mouse said, "Is this it? What is there to drink?" And the Country Mouse said, "Water from the river. It's cleaned." Oh, the Town Mouse was trying to be polite, and he smiled as he ate, but this was nothing like what he was used to. And when they were finished and sitting by the fire, the Town Mouse said, "Next you must come visit me. I have so many things to show you in the town." And the Country Mouse agreed. He would like to see town. He had never seen it before. And so, later that month, the Country Mouse took a trip and went to the city. was very intimidating there, he thought. There were carriages rolling by. He kept having to jump out of people's way. Everyone was bumping into everyone. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, something to do. Maybe they were going to a concert. Maybe they were going to a sports game. Country Mouse felt tired just looking at them. But he made his way to the address where the Town Mouse said that he lived. When he got there, he was very amazed. It was a great big house with a great wooden door. Town Mouse had said that there was a little hole next to the door that he could come in, a hole that was just the right size for a mouse. And when Country Mouse looked, there it was. And he wiggled his way through the hole, and there was Town Mouse waiting for him. And he said, "Well, cousin, what do you think of this?" And Country Mouse said, "It's very grand." And it was. There were lots of fine things in the house. There were fancy paintings, and there were mirrors on the walls, and there was music playing softly somewhere else in the house. The noises that they heard echoed from high ceilings. And Country Mouse felt kind of nervous with everything being so big around him. He felt kind of out in the open and not so safe. But Town Mouse seemed perfectly fine with everything. And he took Country Mouse all around the house, showing him all the lovely things. And then he said, "How about dinner?" And Country Mouse said, "I traveled a long way. I am hungry." So they went into the kitchen. And on the counter, Town Mouse lifted a lid on a dish, and there was cheese. Fresh cheese under there. It was the fancy kind, the kind you get from the fancy market, not the kind that you make yourself. Country Mouse was very surprised about that. And Town Mouse said, "We also have fancy ale." Ale's a grown-up drink. And Country Mouse had never tasted ale before. They found some in a small cup that had been left lying on the counter. And he was just about to taste it when he heard a strange noise, a very strange noise that he'd never heard before. And Town Mouse said, "Shh." And Country Mouse said, "Why do I need to be quiet?" And just then, a cat came slinking into the kitchen with wide yellow eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. And Town Mouse said, "Quickly," and he pulled Country Mouse behind a towel that was up on the counter. And Country Mouse said, "What is that?" And Town Mouse said, "It's just a cat. As long as you're careful, nothing will happen." But the cat smelled them, and the cat stalked his way across the kitchen and jumped up on the counter and pounced. But the Country Mouse and the Town Mouse jumped down off the counter in time and quickly ran for a hole in the wall. And Country Mouse said, "I think I've seen enough, cousin. I think I'm going to head back to my home in the country." And Town Mouse said, "But didn't you like the town?" And Country Mouse said, "I'd rather have beans and bacon in safety than have cheese and ale and fear for my life." For our last song of our last story time of the summer, I'm going to do one of our favorites. How about Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes? Yeah, we like that one. You gotta listen carefully because I do all the verses, not just the first one that everyone knows. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't, but if you follow along, they're not that hard. All right, you ready? Let's see if I can do this. My fingers are having difficulty today. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Pretty good. Feet, tummies, arms and chins, arms and chins. Feet, tummies, arms and chins, arms and chins, and eyes and ears and mouth and shins. Feet, tummies, arms and chins, arms and chins. You got that? Here we go again. Hands, fingers, legs and lips, legs and lips. Hands, fingers, legs and lips, and eyes and ears and mouth and hips, hands, fingers, legs and lips. That one's trickier. We did the first verse again. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Can we do it faster? Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, and eyes and ears and mouth and nose. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Okay, so that's it for this story time. It's not it for the whole summer, though. Remember, you've still got several weeks to keep track of that reading for your summer reading program. Several weeks to keep earning tickets in the Beanstack app. If you haven't started yet, it's not too late. If you go to the racinelibrary.info website, you can still sign up for Beanstack, and you can still record some minutes, and you can still get some pretend raffle tickets, which you can put into pretend raffle drawings in the Beanstack app and earn some not pretend prizes if you're lucky. The more tickets you get, the more chances you have to win. Not too late. And we've still got some craft videos that are going to be coming up this month. If you look on Saturdays especially, there's some good ones with stuff you can just do at home with anything you happen to have lying around. This week, I think Miss Keiko teaches us how just to use black paint to make the most adorable little panda bears. We've got stuff going on. If you come in the library, we've got some scavenger hunts still to play. We've got lots of books and things. We've got our book bundles. You can still grab a book bundle and be completely surprised by the books that are inside. You don't know what's inside. You know maybe what they're about, but you have no idea what books are in there. We all could use a little surprise, couldn't we? I'm gonna miss you guys, but we'll be back again in September with new stories, lots of new stuff, and I'll see you then. All right? In the meantime, reach for the ceiling and touch the floor. Stand up again. Let's do some more. Touch your head and then your knees up to your shoulders. I switched those. Like this, you see. Surprise! Reach for the ceiling and touch the floor. That's all there is. There isn't any more for now. See you later.